Welcome, everyone, to the Technical Coordinating Committee meeting of October 18th, 2018. We're going to start with self-introductions. I'll start to my left.
Steve Kirschvan, City of Brentwood.
Jerry Fay, Contra Costa County.
Sean Hedgepath, County Connection.
Andy Smith, City of Walnut Creek, here.
Andy Dillard, Town of Danville and SWAT.
Paul Reinders, Transplant.
Eric Hughes, City of Pleasant Hill and Transpac.
James Incap, Lafayette, SWAT.
Leah Greenblatt, WIC Tech.
Eileen Hernandez, BART.
John Cunningham, Contra Costa County.
Matt Kelly, CCTA.
Stephanie, JCCTA.
Brad Beck, CCTA.
Eric Bird, Caltrans.
Nisha Carr, City of Richmond.
Jason Chin, City of Orinda.
Just in time. Thanks, Jason. All right, welcome, everyone. So I understand that I'm now chair for the rest of 1819, so that's what happens when you don't show up for meetings, so I appreciate that. But Jason and I were otherwise detained at Contra Costa Leadership Academy since January. It was a great experience, but we're both happy to be back at TCC also, I would think so. Okay, so first item on the agenda here, we have public comments. This is for members of the public to address the committee for any items that are not on the agenda. I have no speaker cards, so seeing none, we will move on to the approval of the summary of actions of the meeting of June 21st, 2018. May I have a motion?
I move to accept.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar, items 1.0 through 3.0. Is there any items that the committee would like to pull for discussion? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion for the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Moving on, item 4.0, these are our regular agenda items. The first up to bat here is the project monitoring update. This is an informational item, and we have Stephanie Hugh who will lead this discussion.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Okay, so today, this item is our regular item for project monitoring. So in your packets, you'll see the standard monitoring reports for STIP, OBAG, ATP, HBP, and HSIP projects, as well as the inactive. And as you know, November 1st is coming upon us quickly, and so those who have projects programmed from 1819, for OBAG, it's on page 4-6. These projects have to have their RFA submitted to Caltrans by November 1st, so just make sure you submit that on time to not risk funding, loss of funding. And then also, this month I wanted to point your attention to some new guidelines for the obligation plan policy that MTC sets for the region. So each summer or early summer, I work with the SPOCs to finalize the obligation plan for that current fiscal year, and that kind of guarantees you the funding for the federal projects. And when we finish the 1819 process, these new rules will apply in the future, so I thought it'd be good for you guys to highlight some of the new rules that will affect us in the future. So on page 4-3 in the item, I've noted 5 of the more significant action items that are required for project sponsors. So first of all is that for you guys to be on any obligation plan, there has to be a formal request from the SPOC now, instead of just going through me or staff here to submit to MTC. Each SPOC has to send an email to MTC staff requesting to be on the obligation plan. And then the second note is the construction phase. If a project has construction phase programmed for that year, you need to have your peer review scheduled by June 30th and completed by September 30th in order to be on the obligation plan. Third, there's a lot of accountability reports that are required by CTC for the SB1 funding and also ATP. So those reports need to be submitted to CTC 15 days prior to the actual deadline. The fourth note is about CTC allocations. So those who have projects that have funding through the CTC, It's now a requirement to submit your request by January 31st and receive the CTC allocation by March 31st. And those who have gone through the CTC process, they don't meet every month, and the documents that you need to submit to Caltrans is usually due like 2 months before the actual CTC meeting date. So, so just be aware if your agency has CTC funds that you need to go through the commission. Please make sure you are aware of this new schedule, and please feel free to contact me. I can give you the CTC schedule if you don't have it. They publish it every year, and you know exactly when the meeting dates are and when things are due. And then lastly is CTC extension. So if those with the CTC funds, if you are seeking extension for award or allocation, you might jeopardize your OBAG money. So that's just a kind of a warning for us. So with that, that's all I have for this item. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks, Stephanie. Any questions from the committee? No questions? All right. Thanks for that update. So we will move on to item 5.0. This is the Contra Costa priorities for development of project study reports. And this is also an informational item.
Yes.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Yeah. So every year we take this to you guys on the TCC. It's a list of projects that the Contra Costa, that our county is considering as priority for development of project study reports that needs Caltrans support. And earlier this month, we were asked to submit this list for fiscal year 2019 to 2021. And as we go through the STIP process every other year, you know that we need, projects that are seeking STIP funds need to have a PSR or a PSR equivalent. And in order to be on the PSR list, you also need to be in MTC's Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP. So on attachment A of this staff report is the list that we sent to Caltrans. And normally we would have taken this to you guys for approval, but they gave us a very short turnaround time this time around, so we had to submit it by October 1st, and so we weren't able to bring it to you. But this is the list that we submitted to Caltrans, and that's why this is an informational item, but we'd be happy to go back to Caltrans if there are other projects that you guys want to add. But we did reach out to local jurisdictions that we think have projects on the RTP, and we reached out to those folks to make sure whether or not they want to be on the list. So we did do that kind of homework. So we did consult relevant jurisdictions that would be affected. So to highlight, there are 8 projects on the list. 6 of them were from the list last year. We removed one because it was completed, which was the northbound I-680 managed lane completion through the 680-24 interchange. So we moved that because the pit is almost completed. And we added 2 projects, which is on the top section under fiscal year 18-19, which is the eastbound 580 Richmond-San Rafael Bridge toll plaza, and the Interstate 580 HOV lane extension from Richmond-San Rafael Bridge to Central Avenue. So those are the 2 new projects that we added, which are led by MTC. So this is an informational item. If you guys want to add more projects, we could add it next year, and if there's one that you want to add urgently, we can reach out to Caltrans to revise the list. So with that, I'll take any questions you guys may have.
I have a few questions. First of all, for the project number 2, the 580 HOV lanes, is that in both directions?
I believe so. Is Sean here? No, he's not. I think it should be. From what I understood, it used to be there.
Yeah, they used to be
and
both
then
directions.
it wasn't used. But then I guess now there is demand for it, or they think they could justify having an HOV lane, so they're looking into having one put back in. But I think it's both directions. But I can confirm.
Okay. And then what would be involved in having some of the West County High Capacity Transit Study recommendations included?
Would it be on 80 mainly? I guess, or 123 or San Pablo Avenue. Those would be the two state routes.
Right.
We can add it, but with the understanding that local jurisdiction, or whoever is sponsoring project, with the pay Caltrans oversight. So, yeah, you can add projects to the list. And like again, if you think it will be happening in 1819, we can contact Caltrans again and add it right away. But if you think it's not going to happen till another year or so, we can wait till the next round to add those.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, see none. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
All right, moving on quickly here through the agenda. 6.0, this is a process for allocating additional One Bay Area grants, the Cycle 2, the Safe Routes to School funding. This is an action item, and we have Mr. Beck here to present for us.
Thank you, Mr. Dillard, and TCC members. During OBAG 2, there were available to us $822,000 in federal CMAQ funds for Safe Routes to School, which had actually been allocated through the extension of OBAG 1, but we didn't include it, but we should have. But now we want to include it. So this is $822,000 in CMAQ funds, specifically for Safe Routes to School projects. And I've gone out to the RTPC tax to talk about this, how to allocate it, came up with some options, which we discussed with them. And basically there were 2 points that all the RTPC tax agreed on. And they're on the second page of our staff report. One, that the additional funds should be allocated to the RTPCs using the same formula that we used in OBAG 2 and also in OBAG 1. It was based on half on enrollment, school enrollment, and half on population within the RTPCs. And the second is that given that the amounts of funds that would be allocated to the RTPCs isn't particularly significant, not for federal funds, that the fund should go only to projects that are already in the TIP to either to expand the scope of work to add project components or to replace some of the local match if there's the ability to do that. That is, if the sponsor has overmatched, that was air quotes for anyone listening online, overmatched the 11.47% required local match. In attachment A, I've gone through all the projects that currently have Safe Routes to School funding and whether that's possible to overmatch or to reduce some of the local match for those projects. But I should say that what we heard from the tax was that should go to projects that already are in the TIP, and it could be that a project that doesn't have Safe Routes to School funding or a Safe Routes to School component already could add one as part of this process, as long as we're not adding a new project to the TIP. So that's the basics of this, and if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them for you. However we use the money, it has to be consistent with OBAG requirements. It has to be Safe Routes to School. It has a project that has to comply with the CMAQ requirements. There are limitations on that. For example, you can't use it for planning. You can't use it to put up a speed sign, variable speed sign, because that deals with cars and it doesn't deal with air quality benefits. It's a safety benefits. If it's purely safety, you can't do that. It has to be something that directly benefits air quality. So anyway, with those caveats, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
So to clarify, all our TPC tax have vetted this at their respective meetings?
Yeah, it's gone out to all the RTPC tax, and I've talked to them, and tried to incorporate what I heard from the committees into this recommendation. It would go to the planning committee in November if you agree to forward it to them, and then to the authority in November. They'll be meeting on the 14th because the regular meeting date is the day before Thanksgiving. And then it would go out to the RTPC asking for the RTPCs to make recommendations on how to use their share of the funding.
So one other question, to be clear, the action that you're asking for today is for the allocation formula.
To approve the recommendation in the staff report, namely to allocate the money out to the RTPCs, to add funding or reduce the local match with this funding. And we would ask the RTPCs to come back with their recommendations on how to use their share of the funding.
I just had a quick question. Was there any areas where the RTPCs had differing opinions?
Not really, no. Everyone wanted their share. You're not surprised, I can tell, by that. And everyone agreed that given the amount of money that their shares, I mean, none of the shares are more than $250,000. Really, that's not a great use of federal funds for all the staff effort that's required to do it. So everyone said, yeah, let's just add it to a project that's already in.
Hey, Brad, if you go up with option B, and I'm guessing on page 6.4 and 6.5, the numbers to the far right add up to 822, and you have an option of replace match or expand scope. Who's deciding on which one they're going to do? Each jurisdiction on their own?
Well, we're asking the RTPCs to figure out. Now, it could be, there's one project in East County that's getting the Safe Routes to School funding, and that's the L Street project in Antioch. So Antioch could do either. They could expand the scope, or they could replace some of their local match. Antioch has got a local match of 15, almost 60%. So they have lots of room to reduce their local contribution.
That's just a quick question. When we had a call for the Safe Routes to School projects originally, was there projects queued up that didn't get funding that could be sitting there waiting for $822,000?
Mostly no, except for East County. Steve is there were some, and that was one of the options that was in the original paper that we sent out to the RTPCs. One of the options was that we add new projects that are Safe Routes to School project. There was some, the RTPC TAC members did consider that and thought about it, but generally they thought for the amount of money that it would be, that they would rather use it for reducing some of the local match, replacing the local match, or adding components.
You know, I guess what I was kind of getting to, but I'm not necessarily suggesting it because I guess I'd get shot here, but that the 822 all go to one project and we all get out of our silos and just take the next most, you know.
That was another option that we identified. That was option one, by the way. And it didn't go anywhere.
You get another project, right?
You get another project. I will say that one of the principles that we were acting under, that the authority adopted for OBAG 2, was to minimize the number of projects that had to go through the local assistance process. So even though we listed that option first, we did note that it went against that principle.
Just one comment. I mean, I guess at Transpac TAC, what we also talked about was, totally to support the authorities' main goals of minimizing project on the federal process and dumping the money
to existing projects, so to speak. The one thing that we talked about also at TAC was not necessarily just limited to the Safe Out to School project list, so to speak. That was part of the OBAC 2, just because during the whole application process with OBAC 2 program, sometimes agencies strategically choose to apply or not apply for Safe Out to School for certain reasons. And so there are other projects, at least from Transpac, that also are federalized through OBAC 2 program that may not technically fall under the Safe Out to School list, but have Safe Out to School components. So, so for at least for Transpac, I think what we're in the process of currently doing also is, aside from just, in this case, the one project from Concord that's on the Safe Out to School list, also look at other projects through OBAC 2 period altogether that's federalized, could also fit the criteria. So I'm not sure whether TACs have a similar discussion.
Not explicitly like that, no. But it is the reason that if you look on page 2, it is the reason why it's the second point at the top of the page is that the funds should be used on projects already programmed, and it doesn't limit it to projects that are explicitly receiving Safe Routes to School funding.
John?
Yeah, on attachment A, project options, for the last project, West Contra Costa Walk and Bike Leaders, why is there not an option provided for expanding scope or replacing match similar to the other projects?
Because they couldn't add any money without increasing the match. Because the match is minimal. They could add $2,000 to the scope, which they would use up in the first couple of hours of going through the process of getting that changed in the tip.
Yeah, now I think we talked about that at WCTAC, didn't we?
Yeah.
Thank you for the reminder.
But why couldn't the scope be expanded if they wanted to contribute more?
Yeah, well, that's what the last sentence says. The county could only expand the scope further if additional local funds for the required match were also added. They could, but the county would have to add additional funding to provide the 11.47% local match. I cannot do that calculation in my head, so I won't give you an example.
Okay, any other questions?
Brad, moving forward, what's the timeline here?
Like I said, we'll take it to the authority in November, and then after that approval, assuming they approve it in November, that we would send out a letter to the RTPCs asking to get back to us sometime early in 2019. And then we would go through the process of adding the projects to the tip. Or changing the funding in the tip.
So I guess in theory, if a project were to be added these additional funds, when in theory is the earliest that the money will be available for the project using the same schedule?
Stephanie knows more about this, the scheduling.
One of the projects that he listed is the Moraga Way Camino Canyon or something. That one's in the current fiscal year. Yes. So I don't know how it would even. I think we would need to work pretty closely with MTC to see how we can amend the tip quickly, because they're already going through the E76 process for that project, or they need to by November 1st. So I don't. For that one, it's a little tight, I think, but I'm sure we can make it work with MTC, perhaps. But the other ones, I think, is just whenever you have time to, whenever you can go into FMS and update your tip listing. For some of I think it would be a good it would be good to refer to the monitoring report because it shows you what year that these projects are programmed. If they're programmed in the later year, I think it wouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I think it's just, you need to update your tip listing for your project that's receiving these extra money. And then working closely with MTC to make sure it's doable. In the case of Moraga, I think if they do get the funding, they should work with MTC fairly quickly to make sure the timing will all work out because they're already pursuing their E76 now. That's what I would add.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, this is an action item, so can I have a motion?
I move approval of the staff recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Leah.
Second.
Second by John Cunningham. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, item 7.0, other business. Matt Kelly.
Thanks, Andy. I just wanted to query you guys about something that we talked about several months ago, and I was wondering if there'd been any resolution. Anyway, the road mileage issue was brought up several months back. Sensitive topic. Where we left, just for background, between 2014 and the 2015 road mileage reports that Caltrans publishes, they changed their linear referencing system, which is the way they measure the roadways. And so the report came back very different than the 2014 report. And that report is how we do our return to source funding, the combination of road mileage and population. So we took this to you guys. You guys saw the differences, realized it was a problem. I reached out to Caltrans. They said they would be reaching out to the cities in order to confirm these new numbers. So I'm just wondering, I'm out of a loop on this, so I'm just wondering if any of you here have been contacted by Caltrans headquarters staff, HPMS staff, regarding your local road mileage. Anyone? Okay. That's what I thought. So I'll reach out to them again and see if they are planning on still contacting you guys, and if we need to bring it back to this committee anytime soon. Just so for your edification, you guys voted to keep the 2014 road mileage going forward until this was resolved. So that's where we stand today. Thanks.
Thanks for that update, Matt. Appreciate that. Takes us to our last item, adjournment. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 15th, 2018, 2:30 p.m. The meeting is adjourned.
very interesting stuff going on right now with the model. I don't know if you've heard. I'm part of the regional modeling working group. So,
Very exciting.
but,
I'm just
yeah.
I sit here.
Yes. I feel bad for Dave because I know he's now having to adjust the schedule and everything. So the modeling side of the thing, it's Lisa Zorn's group, sent the model network out for us to review, and we found lots of issues. And so we kind of said, hey, yeah, and then Dave had to come to our meeting and kind of adjust it.
It's early in the
Exactly, exactly.
It has to be right.
Yeah. Even for Horizon, well, I wasn't so worried about for the Horizons part of things. It was more about the project performance assessment. That's where it gets personal. Horizon, I'm like, I was always do Horizons with the network, sure, no problem. Yeah, no, feeling bad, like logging all my errors and stuff, but I'm gonna go get it right now.